Test, test, 1 2 1 2 test. Test, 1 2 1 2 test. Alright. Where are we at? I mean, I already am live, so manage. Alright, cool. Oh, shit. All right. All right, we're going to test the levels real quick. Test. All right, we're going to test the level. Yeah, that shit works, all right. All right, where are we at? Oh, that is very hard to read. Yeah, that works. All right. So, for more than a decade, the public image of Governor Greg Abbott has been that of a measured, disciplined Republican leader, controlled in tone, careful in speech, and almost surgically consistent messaging. But high ranking Republican operatives, leaked emails, procurement records, donor filings, and intra party financial disputes reveal a different reality behind the scenes. The governor's political identity is increasingly shaped by strategic decisions of Dave Carney, an out of state consultant whose methods, alliances, and rhetoric have defined the most aggressive, polarizing eras of Texas Republican politics. We're going to switch all of this to easy read so I can read it a little easier for y'all. For all of y'all. So just bear with me for a moment here. Carney is not a staffer. He is not a communications advisor. He is the architect of Abbott's political posture, the central strategist behind his campaigns, the enforcer behind his intra-party pressure campaigns, and the conduit through which national donor interests have flowed into Texas at unprecedented scale. And unlike Abbott, who presents deliberate restraint in public, Carney's documented behavior includes profanity-filled internal attacks, hardball tactics that have triggered public rebuke from national Republican figures, and a history of involvement in dark money structures that have drawn legal scrutiny at the federal level. Through Carney, a network of outside organizations, political financiers, and ideological PACs have exerted influence not only on Texas statewide elections, but on legislative primaries, judicial contests, sheriff's races, and even ISD boards. Public records show that while Abbott fundraises with a demeanor of mainstream conservative governor, Carney's political operation directs millions from out-of-state donors into targeted attacks on Republican incumbents, shapes messaging used across multiple PACs simultaneously, pressures county parties over sponsorship dollars, and issues legal threats to GOP officials who don't align with the governor's current politics. None of this is theoretical. There are emails, there are filings, there are contracts, there are donation timelines, there are procurement award sequences that align with political spending patterns. There are county-level accountants describing donor pressure that abruptly escalated after calls from statewide operatives. There are precise dollar amounts that connect out-of-state donor surges to the exact periods when Abbott-backed challengers entered Republican primaries. The picture that emerges is not of a governor acting alone, nor of a Texas-driven political movement. It is a story of how a single strategist from New Hampshire, with decades-long history in dark money operatives and hard-edged political enforcement, built a system where national ideologies and billionaire funders can shape Texas politics through mechanisms that never appear in campaign commercials or public speeches. So this article reconstructs that system through public records, court filings, procurement logs, FEC data, leaked intra-party communications, and interviews with current and former GOP insiders who describe a version of Texas politics that is rarely discussed publicly. A state where a family-friendly public image masks a political operation driven by out-of-state messaging, aggressive donor coordination, and an enforcement structure designed to bring local Republicans into line or replace them. Dave Carney's influence on Texas politics did not begin with Greg Abbott. It began decades earlier in Washington, where Carney built a national reputation as one of the Republican Party's most effective and abrasive operatives. A strategist who works regularly attracted both praise for its tactical precision and controversy for its reliance on dark money structures, scorched earth rhetoric, and legally risky political maneuvers. Carney first came into prominence as political director for President George H.W. Bush, eventually becoming a senior advisor to Bob Dole during the 1996 presidential race. Colleagues from that era describe him as brutally efficient, ruthlessly focused, and unconcerned with the niceties that normally governed intra-party politics. These traits followed him into the private sector, where his strategic consulting shop, Norway Hills Associates, became a hub for high-impact negative advertising and corporate-funded political efforts. The most consequential early chapter came in 1996 when Dave Carney became deeply involved with Americans for Job Security, also known as AJS, a 501c6 dark money organization that perfected the model of anonymous corporate-funded attack ads. While marketed as a pro-business trade group, AJS functioned as a political artillery platform. corporations and wealthy donors could route money into the group, which then funded negative ad campaigns in federal and state races, without disclosing who paid for them. Over the years, AJS was the subject of multiple FEC complaints and legal scrutinies. The Alaska Public Offices Commission concluded in 2013 that AJS had spent millions on what was effectively organized political activity while claiming to be a trade association. AJS paid one of the largest campaign finance penalties ever issued in Alaska after the ruling. Similar scrutiny followed in other states, although AJS often avoided direct penalties through prolonged litigation or by exploiting gaps in state disclosure laws. During the early 2000s, Carney's work with AJS extended into Texas. The group funded attacks against moderate Republicans, including an aggressive campaign against State Rep Tommy Merritt in 2004, signaling a new approach to Texas intra-party politics. Enforce ideological discipline not through persuasion, but through externally funded, anonymously backed negative campaigns. This became a recurring feature of Carney's later work for Abbott. Carney's reputation for internal aggression became national news in 2010 during Rick Perry's primary challenge against Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson. Emails from Carney surfaced in which he repeatedly used the slur retarded, language that triggered public condemnation from Sarah Palin, who at the time was one of the most influential figures in the GOP. Perry apologized. Carney did not. Insiders say it was not unusual for him. Profanity-laced internal tirades were, according to several former staffers, part of his working style. This incident matters not because of the language alone, but because it demonstrated Carney's operational posture. None of the guardrails that made traditional Republican politics predictable applied to him. He was willing to go after fellow Republicans with the same intensity normally reserved for Democrats. He was willing to alienate party factions. He was willing to burn bridges if doing so advanced his strategic goals. When Abbott launched his 2014 campaign for governor, he did not merely hire a strategist. He adopted an entire political model shaped by Carney's history in national dark money campaigns. Centralized message control, external donor alignment, aggressive use of negative advertising, and a willingness to target Republican officials who deviated from the program. This is the through line that explains the next decade of Texas political behavior. Carney imported a model that was never designed for collaborative governance. It was designed for enforcement. His background in dark money structures informed how he leveraged 501c4 and 501c6 groups in Texas. His history with AJS informed how he coordinated messaging across multiple PACs without direct disclosure. In 2010, controversy previewed his approach to intra-party dissident. His Washington connections introduced Texas to a network of national donors who viewed the state as a high-return investment for ideological priorities such as privatization, deregulation, and border militarization. By the time Abbott became governor, Carney was no longer just running campaigns. He was shaping the political ecosystem itself. Understanding how Dave Carney ultimately reshaped Texas politics requires understanding the network of dark money structures he helped build and navigate long before entering Texas Republican campaigns. These organizations, 501c4 political nonprofits, 501c6 trade associations and PAC adjacent entities designed specifically to obscure donor identity formed the backbone of his strategic model. By the time he was directing Abbott's statewide operation, these structures had become the central arteries through which national money and influence flowed into Texas. The most significant was Americans for Job Security, AJS, which Carney helped establish in 1996, and which operated for nearly 2 decades as one of the most effective dark money entities in the United States. AJS was repeatedly accused of functioning as an undisclosed political committee rather than a trade association as it claimed. Federal and state filings later showed that AJS spent tens of millions on elections without disclosing its funders, relying on loopholes in federal disclosure laws and exploiting the legal gray zone around issue advocacy. Investigators in Alaska uncovered internal documents revealing that AJS had coordinated political messaging with donors and campaign intermediaries, activities that regulators said cross the line into illegal campaign intervention. The Alaska Public Offices Commission eventually ordered AJS to disclose its donors, a near unprecedented move, and find its affiliates in one of the largest campaign finance rulings in state history. Other states filed similar complaints, alleging that AJS was used to route money into negative campaigns while concealing its true sources. AJS dissolved in 2015 amid mounting scrutiny. Carney's long association with AJS is relevant not simply because of its controversy, but because the group's methods appear again in Texas politics under Abbott. The use of outside nonprofits to shape political outcomes coordinated donor networks funding attacks on specific Republicans. The blurring of lines between issue advocacy and direct electioneering, and sudden surges of money that cannot easily be traced through standard Texas Ethics Commission filings. Alongside AJS, Carney's consulting ecosystem intersected with other national dark money structures. During the early 2010s, several organizations that later became major players in Texas, such as the American Federation for Children, Club for Growth Action, Texas Right to Life, the Family Policy Alliance, and multiple DeVos-aligned 501c4s operated with similar patterns. Heavy investments in targeted negative campaigns, shared consultants across state lines, and donor anonymity protected by nonprofit tax classifications. Public records show that once Abbott took office, these same organizations began playing an increasingly large role in Texas primaries, especially in efforts to unseat rural Republicans who opposed vouchers or lawmakers who deemed insufficiently aligned with state priorities. In several cycles, these groups spent more in rural Texas House primaries than Texas-based donors did. An unprecedented intervention in state political history. Hey, welcome Hollywood. Glad to have you here. Anyone else watching? Check out Hollywood Stream Sniper. He's one of my buddies. He's amazing. He's fun. He's awesome. Go check him out. One of the starkest examples came from Pennsylvania billionaire Jeff Yass, whose network routed millions into Texas through groups like the Club for Growth, the ARC PAC, and various education privatization nonprofits. None of these groups are Texas-based. Yet between 2020 and 2024, they poured an estimated 15 to 20 million into Texas races. Almost all of it aligned with the political priorities of the Abbott-Carney operation. Much of this money passed through nonprofit organizations not required to disclose donors. Similarly, Michigan's DeVos family, longtime backers of school privatization, expanded their Texas footprint after Abbott embraced vouchers as a priority. Through the American Federation for Children and related entities, DeVos-aligned groups financed multi-million-dollar independent expenditures in Texas primaries, often using the same messaging frameworks and consultants tied to Abbott's campaign or aligned PACs. This pattern, shared donors, shared consultants, shared messaging, synchronized attack timings, mirrored the structure Carney refined at AJS. While no organization controlled the entire network, Carney's strategic role meant that he was effectively coordinating the Texas side messaging that these outside groups fed into. What makes this notable from a public interest perspective is not that outside donors support Texas candidates. That's common. It is the scale, synchronization, and centralization of control behind the scenes that distinguish this from ordinary political engagement. Many donors appear to adjust their spending in direct correlation with Abbott internal priorities. Priorities shaped by Carney's strategic directions. For example, voucher-aligned dark money groups increasing their spending dramatically between the 2021 and 2024 primaries, the exact window in which Abbott adopted private school subsidies as a core agenda item. Internal GOP sources reported that this shift was not driven organically by Texas voters, but by donors' expectations communicated through political intermediaries. Carney's position allowed him to shape which policy priorities received intense external financial support and which did not. This interplay between dark money entities and Abbott's political strategy became especially visible when multiple PACs launched simultaneous attacks using nearly identical messaging lines, graphics, polling numbers, and scripts. Although legally separate, the coherence suggested a central messaging source, one that outsiders say was Carney's shop. These structures also shielded the financial relationships that underpinned the Abbott political operation. Donors could contribute through nonprofits without public attribution, preserving Abbott's family-friendly public image, while Carney directed the harder-edge attacks externally. This explains why Abbott's personal brand remained steady and mild, even as his political machine pummeled Republican incumbents with some of the most aggressive negative advertising in state's modern history. The dark money network provided what insiders describe as the distance to do what was needed to be done. Abbott did not have to be the face of attacks. Carney and the aligned groups handled that network from behind a legal and structural buffer. The structure also enabled what critics later defined in Texas media as a pay-for-play ecosystem. Not ecosystem, ecosystem. Because listen, this is how it works. Donors routed money through nonprofits to support political causes and candidates. Those candidates advanced policies that benefited those donors. And some of those same donors' companies, subsidiaries, or aligned industries later received favorable regulatory treatment or state contracts. Pattern explored in the next section. This is not conjecture. There are patterns visible in FEC filings, Texas Ethics Commission reports, IRS disclosures for 501c4s and C6s, state procurement databases, campaign finance timelines, internal email and county level accounts, public testimony, investigating reporting from credible outlets. Carney's dark money ecosystems functions not as a single entity, but as a coordinated financial environment structured to project national influence into Texas politics through mechanisms that avoid direct public scrutiny. It is the foundation upon which the rest of the Abbott era machine is built. The term pay for play is often used loosely in political commentary, but Texas media outlets, including the Houston Chronicle, the Dallas Morning News, the Texas Tribune, and the San Antonio Express News, have repeatedly documented patterns in the Abbott administration that match what ethics experts describe as structural pay-for-play dynamics. Donors giving large sums to the governor and state receiving contracts, regulatory advantages, or favorable treatment afterwards. These patterns do not always indicate illegality, but when they repeat across multiple agencies, multiple fiscal years, and multiple donor relationships, they point to a governance environment that rewards political loyalty through state power. The first major example surfaced in 2018, when investigative reporting revealed that companies whose executives donated heavily to Abbott's campaign had received hundreds of millions of dollars in statewide contracts, many awarded through expedited or non-competitive processes. One energy firm whose leadership contributed more than $300,000 to Abbott and Abbott-aligned PACs secured lucrative agreements with the Texas General Land Office and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Another donor-connected vendor, an infrastructure firm with no prior Texas footprint, won contracts worth tens of millions after executives increased contributions to Abbott's political operation. These filings did not emerge in isolation. Journalists and watchdog groups found similar patterns in contract awards issued through the Health and Human Services Commission, the Department of Public Safety, and the Office of the Governor's Criminal Justice Grants. Some of these alignments were small scale. Others involved contracts exceeding $100 million. What made the patterns notable was that many of the beneficiaries had simultaneously ramped up political giving, often to Abbott, sometimes to both Abbott and PACs aligned with his political priorities. The transparency gap widened dramatically during Abbott's repeated emergency declarations. Beginning with the COVID-19 pandemic and continuing into Operation Lone Star, Abbott exercised political procurement powers that exempted agencies from standard competitive bidding rules. These powers allowed agencies to contract directly with vendors, which is legal under Texas law, but significantly reduces oversight. During the peak of pandemic spending, Texas issued more than $11 billion in emergency-related purchases. In a review of procurement records from that period, watchdog groups found that several vendors receiving emergency contracts had ties to donors who contributed to Abbott or to policy-aligned nonprofits connected to Carney national networks. And boy, we're not even halfway done. All right. Well, I got to hit the road, guys, but I appreciate you, and we'll start again next time.